Joining me now, Ohio Republican gubernatorial candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. I don't care, Vivek. I don't care about the offender's story. I don't care why he's been in jail 6 or 7 times. I don't care this is a heartwarming story of a family accepting their transgender son. What about the victims, Vivek?
Yeah, look, there's a dirty little secret in fighting crime, Will, which is that the overwhelming majority of urban crime, violent urban crime in particular, is committed by a really small number of people. And we know who they are, even in cities like Columbus, where I'm talking to you from. It's fewer than 500 people that commit a majority of crime in a million-plus city. We know who they are. We know where they're committing the crimes. A majority of crimes in cities across this country are committed in fewer than 5% of locations. So this isn't rocket science, Will. We know how to do it. Precision policing. The real answer is, do we have the courage and conviction to see it through? And I heard those comments from the mayor of Seattle. Let's just get the best shake for the other side. They may say, right? They may say, okay, well, it's not just about policing in the near term. What about getting to the root causes? I would love to get to the root causes. Bring back family formation, 2-parent households in this country. These are solutions that conservatives have championed for a long time, that I've championed for a long time. But we can do both of these things at once, focus on the long run, focus on actually bringing back the family, but do it while getting that small handful of violent criminals off the street, either into a psychiatric institution where they belong or else into prison, period.
So the root causes thought experiment and explanation, I appreciate your interest in that. I'm interested in that as well, but I'm interested in it in terms of crime prevention and societal formation. But at some point, an offender has moved us beyond that theory, beyond that conversation, and beyond their story. So I don't want to hear the mayor of Seattle talk about trying to understand a 6 or 7 time repeat offender's story. And I don't know how we have a judge, in this case it's Judge Deborah Boardman, by the way. She was appointed by Joe Biden, confirmed in 21. She's the same judge, by the way, that blocked President Trump's birthright citizenship restrictions. A judge who seems now more focused not on what could have been, the murder of a Supreme Court justice, but the story of this guy and transitioning and his family. Like, how do we end up with politicians and judges focused on the offenders?
Well, look, I think there's 2 different issues on the root cause discussion. First of all, there are the offenders who are offending and violating the law right now. They need to be dealt with. Violent crimes, we're too light on them. It's not just the federal judges in these one-off cases. It's mostly local and even state judges. That's where we need to bring back bail reforms in the direction of actually making sure that violent offenders aren't let out on the street. A new meaning to bail reform. And also sentencing reform to make sure violent criminals are either in prison or in a psychiatric institution where they belong. The root cause discussion is not for the current offenders, Will, because that's already, that cake is baked. It's for the next generation of would-be offenders. And I think on our side, we can be both compassionate to that future generation while being firm and just for those who have violated the law. And by the way, I'm going to be leading the way in Ohio, setting a standard for the country for what this looks like. We're not going to go soft because that's not true compassion. That's actually cruelty to the citizens who are living lawful lives, and we're going to act accordingly.
Exactly. And by the way, it's no big leap for someone who shares your politics or values to say we can get to root causes by talking about exactly as you did, family formation in Ohio. By the way, Vivek, you're going to be speaking, in addition to running for governor, you're going to be speaking at a Turning Point USA event tomorrow at Montana State. You are a deep thinker. You are smart. And so I'm curious what you think about this, I guess, in an attempt to be a deep thinker. Thomas Chatterton Williams, he writes at The Atlantic. He wrote this article that went up over the weekend. It compared Charlie Kirk to George Floyd. He basically said they've both been turned into martyrs by their side. The headline is, "The Other Martyr MAGA Has Found It's George Floyd." It's pretty offensive to almost everyone that saw it. There is no intellectual justification, no curiosity that puts Charlie Kirk on the same plane as George Floyd. But it was, I guess, for The Atlantic.
Look, I think that I don't even want to entertain the premise of that comparison. They're 2 fundamentally different people. Charlie was a friend of mine. I'm proud to take his spot on the tour where he began on that first event in Utah. We're continuing it tomorrow at Montana State. But even if we're just to take that argument, right, at face value, what did the left do on the back of George Floyd's killing? What did they do? They silenced conservatives. They resorted to cancellation, to punishment, to even accepting and using the government to pressure companies to do through the back door what the government could not accomplish through the front door under the Constitution, social media companies and so forth. And so, Will, I'm not into defeating the left. That doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. What I care is for our side to set the standard for practicing what we preach. And this is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow night in the speech, is that For the right, I do view this as a fork in the road. Do we want to imitate the methods of the left? Do we want to play at their level? I say the answer to that question is no. We keep going. That's who we are. Not lowering ourselves to their level, but to hold ourselves to the actual principles of the country. Not berating, embarrassing, canceling, silencing, punishing, but standing for freedom, merit, the rule of law, the pursuit of excellence. And that's hard. That's hard when called upon. I do think this is going to be the choice, the fork in the road for our future, and I think the right path is clear. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow in Montana State.
I look forward to that speech, and I think that fork has been chosen. The path has been chosen. The question has been answered. The one other thing we saw when it came to George Floyd was rioting and violence and burning the streets and cities down. And what did we see in the wake of Charlie Kirk? We saw a stadium filled with people celebrating their faith and worshiping and peace. And so it is hard. It is hard to appeal to your better angels. But I think we've just seen an entire nation of people choose their better angel. And it makes me optimistic for America. And I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see you today. I'm glad to see you tomorrow in Montana. And we'll keep up with you as well in Ohio. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you, Will.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.